Hello everyone, so today I'm going to be sharing my birth story with my little one. He was born on June 16th of this year. He's fighting his sleep right now, so he might be a little bit distracted. And me rocking might be a little distracting too, so hopefully you can bear with me as I kind of talk through everything that happened. I want to put a little disclaimer out there that this was my birth story. Not everyone's might be the same. You might have a totally different experience or a better experience than I did. It's really just every birth story is unique, so just keep that in mind when listening to this. I'll try to kind of explain everything, but if I don't explain anything, you can leave a comment down below and I can kind of answer any questions that you might have. So to start off, I kind of went into birth with this expectation that I did not want to be induced. I wanted to go into labor naturally and kind of wanted to do it all natural. And it was almost like a funny little joke, like that's not how it's going to happen. I was 3 centimeters dilated and 50% effaced from 38 weeks on. And so my doctors at 30 weeks told me, you will not go to term. He's more than likely going to come around like that weekend, not to kind of go out of town, because they figured he would be coming early. So I had in my mind at 38 weeks that I'd be having him within the next week. Well, next week rolls around, still the same, and then 40 weeks rolls around, and I'm still the same progressed. So at 40 weeks, we started talking about induction. And so I was very against him being induced. I just don't like the thought of Pitocin, and just all of it kind of worried me a little bit. So that next week, we set a date for the 30, or exactly when I was 41 weeks, which was June 16th. And so that next week, I tried everything to get labor going. I actually, that following week, thought I went into labor because I was having the contractions. They just weren't strong enough. They were consistent enough and long enough, but they did not have the intensity that my body needed to kind of push things along further. So nothing really happened. So on June 16th, that morning, I was scheduled to be induced at 9 a.m. So we kind of got up, got everything ready, headed to the hospital, and I think we got admitted at 9, and then I don't think the whole labor process started until probably about 11. And in between that time, I was filling out paperwork. I had the doctor come in and introduce herself, meeting all the nurses, kind of getting hooked up to IVs, and just different things that you kind of have to do before they start Pitocin. So they started Pitocin around 11, and they were increasing it by 2, I don't know how the measurements, but I know that they were going up 2 every 30 minutes. So it took me until about, I got to 8, till they upped it to 8, to where the pain was starting to get unbearable, and I knew that they were about to come in and up it again, and they said the epidural would take a while to get. So I decided I was going to go ahead and get the epidural. In that time, they had upped the Pitocin, and the contractions got stronger, and before I could get the epidural, I had to finish a bag of fluids. So I had to wait for a bag of fluids and then the anesthesiologist to come in and kind of walk through everything that would happen. And so it probably all in all took about an hour and a half from the time that I said I wanted an epidural until it was in. There was a few hiccups with the epidural. They had to kind of go in about 3 times. They said that the way my back was positioned, it was hard to get the needle up there. So that was just a problem that I kind of had to deal with. That was probably one of the hardest things recovering from labor, was the back pain. I would get these kind of nerve pains all in my back, and so it would hurt to walk, it would hurt to stand. But as I've kind of healed, it's gone away. So not something that I was stuck with, which is very fortunate. So they come in, they do the epidural, and this is probably at about 3 in the afternoon, or 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And within an hour of getting the epidural, they had me on my side, and I just felt this immense pressure, and my body just started pushing. There's no way to describe the pressure, and it was still almost pain in my hips. So I had my husband call the nurses, and they didn't think that they were going to recheck me. And so they checked me, and I had progressed to a 7 very quickly. And so they were like, wow, they were just kind of shocked that I progressed that quickly, but didn't think anything of it. So they were like, well, we're going to switch you to the other side and give you a couple hours, and then we'll recheck you. And they had said at this point it would be 4 hours. So I'm thinking that they're going to recheck me about 8 o'clock. They don't like to do checks very frequently just so they don't introduce bacteria into you or the baby. And so about probably 30 minutes goes by, and my body just starts pushing again, and there was nothing I could do to control it. It was just kind of happening on its own. And so the doctor comes in again, and they look, and they say that I'm at 8. And so they told me to kind of, there's different positions they're trying to get me into, because he was sunny side up, and so they're trying to rotate him all while getting my body to progress to be fully dilated. At this point, his head was already there, it's just my body wasn't dilating, so they're trying to get my body to dilate more so that way he could go through, because they did not want me pushing at an 8. And so it went on for a couple of hours. At this point it was 4 o'clock, and my body was just like, every contraction I was pushing, and they kept telling me not to push, and so I tried to kind of not to push and let my body dilate more. And then finally at about 6 o'clock, it was just, I couldn't control the pushes. My body was kind of just pushing them out. And so at that point, they had the doctor come in, and they're like, well, you're at a 9. So they said, I'll just have the doctor ready, and we'll start doing practice pushes, and that might help you dilate further. And so they have a nurse come in, and she's doing the practice pushes, and on the first push, she yells, she's like, stop, don't push anymore. And so she's like, the baby's like starting to come out. So they had me kind of hold in through the contractions, and they pulled the whole team in. And with them pulling the whole team in, I wasn't allowed to push. They kept telling me to kind of hold out through the contractions, and my body at this point was still trying to push, and they were telling me to relax, do everything not to let your body push him out, kind of thing, until everyone was in the room and they had everything set up. And so I think the reason that they had me hold on is, with me being a first-time mom and this my first baby, they were expecting my labor to go a lot longer than what it had. And it had happened, normally they say like it would have been the next day that I delivered him, and they weren't expecting me to have him within 8 hours of starting the Pitocin. So everyone comes in, and the doctor gets down there, and I wonder sometimes if I was even at a 9, because I could feel her trying to, or maybe I was still at a 9 and she just wanted me at a 10. But I could feel her trying to stretch me open, sorry for the TMI, to get him out better. But all in all, I think it took maybe 20 minutes of pushing, and he was here. Pushing, when they were letting me push, it felt so good, because I'd had all this pressure and was told not to push for so long, that finally, like, releasing it all felt so good. And so in labor, I forgot to mention this earlier, but I didn't know at the time that I had a fever, but I just kept getting these really bad hot flashes, and I assumed that it was because I was in labor, and it was at about the time that I was transitioning into about that 7 centimeters, so I figured it was normal, and I just had my husband put a fan on me. But post-labor, I ran into a few complications, and we still don't really know what it was. I had a little bit of high blood pressure through labor, but nothing super high where they were really worried, but it was a little bit high. And so after I had given birth, when you go to use the restroom for the first time, when I stood up, a very large clot come out, and probably the size, like at least probably half of the size of a placenta. It was very large. And so I had that, and just a lot of clotting. And they said not to get too worried past the first day, unless they got bigger than the size of an egg. And that's kind of when I needed to be worried about it. But through the night, I ended up running a fever and had high blood pressure. It all subsided after taking Tylenol and Motrin, though. I want to say it was better by that morning. I was still kind of out of it a little bit from having the fever and the high blood pressure, but by that morning, all that had subsided, and I was just exhausted from not sleeping, because you have the nurses coming in and out. But overall, everything went really well. I was super scared to be induced, so if any of you out there are waiting to be induced or anything like that, and you're super nervous about it, don't be. It's honestly, in a way, it was almost nice, because I had it planned. We live an hour away from the hospital, so I had no idea if we were to go into labor, kind of how we'd get there, if I would make it to the hour, or kind of what would happen with that. So in a way, it was nice to know, okay, hey, we're going in at this time and we're gonna come home with the baby. It wasn't any false alarms or anything like that. So that was nice. And then also too, when you're filling out the paperwork, so when you first walk in and when you're talking to doctors, they have time to kind of go over everything and answer any questions that you might have. So you're not like going in full-blown labor and just can't even think. Because once you get to that point where you're at a 6, 7, 8, you're just not really there. I was there, but I don't really remember everything that happened. I can remember bits and pieces of it, but it's better to kind of go in open-minded about it, and then that way you're present for the beginning, and then you kind of know what's going on and know what to expect a little better. So for me, I didn't mind being induced. I was really worried about Pitocin, but it worked out okay. I never had problems with his heartbeat while I was in labor, except for when he dropped really low. When he finally got to the point where his head was there, they had a hard time monitoring him, and it was just because they couldn't get the monitors low enough. That was the only problem that we had through labor. But this, I will say, I've heard a lot of induction stories, first-time moms, and it does not go like this. I think I was just very lucky, and we didn't have any problems. In the hospital, I went in Friday morning, and then we left Sunday afternoon. I want to say it's probably like 1 or 2 when we finally were discharged. And the main thing, and I think it was me and my husband's fault, we had to wait until he peed to leave the hospital. And so the first night, we're pretty sure he had peed on a blanket, but we didn't know for certain, so we just didn't count that as a pee. And then he finally peed that next day. So they were, after it had been 24 hours, but we were waiting for that 24-hour period to make sure he had peed and pooped and everything. But he passed all of his tests really well. The jaundice scores and everything went really well. We had no problems with that, and he didn't lose a ton of weight going out of the hospital. The only problem I had in the hospital was latching, and I can talk about this in a whole other video if you guys would like, but we ended up having he had a lip tie, a tongue tie, and then his 2 buckle ties, and so that just caused problems breastfeeding from the beginning. And so in the hospital, that was the number one struggle, was just trying to get him to eat. I ended up having to express it and syringe feed him so I could get him to eat, because I knew I wanted to breastfeed and I didn't want to give him formula just yet. And so that's how I had to feed him in the hospital. And then sometimes on that first day home, we had to do it if I couldn't get him to latch at all. I was very fortunate that I had an oversupply, so he didn't really have to suck or latch that great. It kind of just flew into his mouth. And so I didn't have to worry about him latching. But as he got older, into that 1 to 2 week range, is when we started having more problems, because he wasn't latching properly and it was causing him not to gain as much weight as he should. And so we've gotten it all fixed at this point. We've had them revised. We actually go in 2 days for his checkup. We ended up doing it laser, but they're going to check to make sure they haven't reattached. But I would recommend any moms out there that do have the lip and tongue tie, that if it is affecting your breastfeeding, to go get it checked out, just get second opinions. And I could do a whole other video about kind of my whole process with that and kind of how it went, dealing with pediatricians, lactation consultants, occupational therapists, and then getting it revised and how all of that went on. So if that's something you'd like, you can leave a comment down below and I can be sure to post that video. But any questions you guys have, I'll insert some pictures at the end of kind of the whole labor process, but we weren't allowed to video it. My husband tried to pull the camera out when I was pushing and they wouldn't let us, so it is what it is. We have pictures kind of go through labor, but he came out perfect. And any mom out there that's watching this and you're about to give birth, the second that you hear your baby cry, it is a feeling that you can't explain it. It is just pure love. So I'm hoping everyone has safe and happy deliveries, or if you're just watching this, I hope you're having a great day. But yes, if you guys have any questions, leave it down below. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more mom tips. Thank you. Bye-bye.